Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say welcome to you. Thank you, Minister, for your comments. This is my first Brexit meeting. I know for the rest of you, you've probably had two or perhaps more of that already, but I know this is the third Board Bia Brexit meeting, and I'd like to welcome, and from my perspective, thank you very much, Bren, from my perspective, welcome you all here today. What the purpose of today is really about is launching the Brexit Barometer. And what we were looking at when we decided what we were looking to do was finding a toolkit that would measure pressure. And that's what a barometer, I guess, does, and that gives you the name and the way we've chosen to do that. And over the course of the next couple of minutes, what I want to do with you is walk you through what we're doing for Brexit, to give you an understanding of what's happening in the market, but then what is Board Bia doing about it? How are we approaching it? How are we analysing our own initiatives? How are we challenging ourselves on it? And then what are the plans and activities going forward? The scale of the issue, and I think when Brian mentioned earlier on the fact that he had asked companies what did they think, would Brexit affect them or not, he mustn't have been at a food event, because every food event I've been at, there's a very clear realisation that Brexit is going to have a huge impact on us. And quoting some of the figures that the Minister has already mentioned, we do export 11.15 billion, which we announced here in January, but then you've got 37% of those exports going to the UK. And that's a figure that's quoted very, very regularly, but I guess it's not a homogenous story either, because when you look at the categories behind those figures, then you see there's individualised stories coming in for every single one of that. There's been huge media coverage on horticulture, particularly our mushrooms industry, that have a 90% exposure to it. You move to prepared consumer foods at 70%, meat at 54%, and even when you see dairy at 30%, that belies the fact that you've a cheddar and butter story going on in the background, where you've got over 50% of our cheddar exports going to the UK, and we are the main source of cheddar for the UK, so there's almost a mutual dependence on it. You look at our beverages industry and you see again, maybe it's not a big issue, it's only 30% of our exports of beverages, yet you look at the whole supply chain where you've got two integrated industries that are mutually dependent, and in seafood, you've got access to territories and waters. So no matter what story that you're looking for and you're trying to analyse behind it, that 37% actually probably doesn't tell you that whole story. It's a much more complicated issue that we're looking at. And it's a two-way piece, because if you look at our own Irish market, we're one of the huge sources as a market for the UK as well. So we're talking about an over €3 billion market that we represent to the UK exports, with a very different dynamic to it when they're looking at prepared consumer foods as the key recipient. Now, obviously, some of our companies will say, is that an opportunity? Is that a threat? It's something that we have to analyse going forward and be prepared for. It's more data. It's information that we have at our disposal, and it's from our objective going forward that we have to understand where is that going to take us and what's the consequence of knowing this information. Because when you look at where Ireland is and you look at the profile of our exports, no matter what our trading partners, we're actually very currency dependent. We have an international market profile. We need to know what's happening on euro exchange rates right the way through, because every part of the 70% of our exports is reaching a different market. And when you're looking at the skill set that manages that international portfolio, it's a new volatility or a new element we have been used to in some ways, but that volatility part of currencies has increased. And I guess political instability has a huge impact on what's happening in that currency volatility. And if we just take the view of what's happened in the UK, when it was in a very benign place back in November at 72p, where nobody was really that worried about currency at the time, and costings, etc., were pretty strong from an Ireland perspective, you saw then that it hit highs of almost 90% or 90p, with huge talk of parity. And what would that do to our industry if we were looking at that scenario? And what would that do on our dependency on the UK? And the Minister already referenced some of the impact that had, with a decrease of our value of exports of over €500 million in that period. And today it's at 86p. But if we look back for 10 years, it's been floating in or around 82, 83, 84 for those 10 years. So we're probably closer to the norm today than we are to the 72, which might have been viewed as much of an exception as the 90p is as well. But this is all part of the huge unknowns, because when you go to that 86 and you've moved from a 72p, that has an effect on the prices that the consumer in Britain is going to have to pay for their products. And there was huge discussions, publicity about who could get prices through in the negotiations with UK retailers, and the fact that they were blocking for a long moment in time any acceptance of anyone trying to negotiate a price increase for them. Now there's been some successes, and the effect and the realism of price increases coming through is being experienced in the market. We've had some experience ourselves, and some success ourselves from our mushrooms industry, already having some success in increasing their prices to the UK market. But when you look at the effect that has, you can clearly see that the Bank of England now is accepting an outlook of inflation in the UK market. And that will have to be driven by the currency and exchange rates, with the National Institute predicting that that actually could even be anything up to 4% going forward. When we talk to our customers, our UK customers particularly, about how does all of this affect them? How are they viewing Brexit? What are the challenges that they're seeing? Well, they're in the dark as much as us, I guess, from a lot of perspectives. But one of the key pieces that worries them is that unknown future tariff regime. And that's one of the parts that everybody is concerned about that we speak to, because there is so much unknown, but it's such a drastic effect. But what they're looking for, and the expectation that they have from all of their customers, and particularly when you see what a big supplier Ireland is to them, they're actually looking for support from us. They're looking for us to be able to supply some of the answers and facilitate some of the planning as well. So that means it is so important for us as an industry to be informed, to understand the scenarios and to keep ourselves informed, and to make sure that our sources of information are accurate as well as we help and support our customers. They have a positive attitude towards Ireland, and British consumers have a positive attitude towards Ireland, and all of our research that we've commissioned recently will actually endorse that. But that's not to ignore that there is a Buy British movement there as well, and that has to be managed, and that has to be helped, I guess, from our customers' perspective, and how do they work through that, knowing they're just 60% self-sufficient. They can't all only buy British, but at the same perspective, how do we help our customers with the right arguments and the right supports to make sure that that doesn't get too much credibility either. But being real about it, this country, the UK, needs food. It needs to be supplied with food, and most of the buyers that are working within that are very real about security of supply. But they're also real about the price that they'll pay for that security of supply. And I guess I won't go too much into the depth of these scenarios, but when you're looking at that, we were at the very beginning of these discussions speaking of soft Brexit versus hard Brexit, looking at short-term versus long-term, and trying to see what are the different options that faced Ireland or had the possibility to face Ireland or any of the partners. And there was talk of, is the customs union an option? Is a free trade agreement? Or is that cliff that everyone speaks of, WTO, where there is freedom of access, but it's at the price of huge tariffs? Are they the options that are present in front of us now? And if you do have those worst case scenarios, then you can see, and we've worked out for some of these, this is what the tariff figures could possibly look like. So if you're talking about fresh beef going to the UK, putting a standard tariff on it, you'd actually increase our costs by anything up to 65%. Similarly, if you're looking at our cheddar, it would increase it by 50%. So currency in some instances is the least of our worries when you have to add that to it as well, but that's your worst case scenario. And I guess that does give an impetus to anybody to say, how do I forward plan knowing these scenarios? This is not painting a bleak picture. These are the facts and figures and scenarios that we have ahead of us. And if you look at what is ahead, and I'll defer clearly to Pat Cox for his expertise on the journey ahead, but if we just see that March 29th, we're going to have that triggering of Article 50. We're going to have discussions beginning in May and September negotiations. But in the backdrop to that, we're also going to have a French presidential election, a German election, where all of that adds to colour, emotion, maybe not as much logic debate versus the facts that we'd like people to be talking about, but that's the surround sound that we're dealing with. But the key message, I guess, that we're going to be talking about for the rest of today is there's no point in looking backwards. This is all about a new trading environment. And it's very hard, and we were chatting a little about this earlier on, to even imagine or reference the past when you're looking at something that's so unknown as what we have. And that's why it's so important to prepare and be informed of the preparations we need to do. We had changed this part of our slide regularly since we started preparing this, in that should we talk about a 2 to 3 year transition period? Should we be talking about a 6-year transition period? More recent media comments are saying to us it could be a 10-year transition period. That's the part we don't know. But what we are doing is scenario building, discussing, informing ourselves so that we're prepared. I guess in the quoting from the minister on this one, we're preparing for the worst and yet we're hoping for the best on it. When I came into the job, and I clearly can say that I came into the job not knowing about Brexit. I came in knowing it was there. But one of the key questions I've been asked about it is, do you change Bord Bia's strategy? Bord Bia's strategy was launched pre-Brexit. Is it something that we should throw out now because the world has changed? It's a different world we're living in, so that should be re-looked at, re-examined and rechecked. And we have looked at it. And we've spent quite a lot of time looking at it to make sure that we're as robust as we possibly can be. And if you look at the 5 pillars of the strategy that we have, it's all about starting with the consumer. It's understanding what the consumer needs and what that consumer wants. It's about having the right infrastructure in place and the right people to populate that infrastructure. It's about differentiating ourselves through the first campaign in the world that's around sustainability. The first country who's able to make claims on sustainability that we know all of our key customers are moving towards. It's about converting all of that into business and understanding the routes to market that we need to convert that to business. And it's telling that story as well as we possibly can. So when we looked through each one of those pillars, we said absolutely not do we change that. What we do have to change, though, is how we deliver it. Because there's no point in looking at the same routes to market as we've looked at traditionally when we've just got a brand new trading environment. But the 5 pillars stand. And the 5 pillars will remain for the next 2 years that we've committed to. So what have we done if we're not changing our strategy? We've actually looked at the actions that we need to do. So we first of all set up a Brexit group, and it's obviously linking very closely with the department and the work that they do, because there's so many moving parts in this that needs to have every part of our organisation structured around it. We've appointed Shane Hamill as a dedicated resource to coordinate our Brexit movements, because even as the Minister was mentioning, all of the different boards and initiatives that are being taken up, they have to be resourced properly and coordinated properly. We've been relooking at the supports we're giving to clients, and I'll mention some of the new ones that we've introduced, but we're also continuously sense-checking ourselves. Are we robust enough? Are we changing as fast as we need to support you in the environment that you're dealing with as well? And then we're looking at the markets and what does that need. When we look at our Brexit group, it's meeting every single week, chaired by myself, but what we're really looking at is monitoring developments, reviewing our activities, assessing the needs, looking at the market opportunities and getting next steps out of it. But one of the key platforms that everything is being grown upon is sectoral analysis. Because as I started the presentation, this is not just looking at that 37% of exports, sure they're all the same. It's actually understanding it's a very different story in seafood versus beef. It's a very different story for dairy, and even within dairy, cheddar versus butter versus powders. So it's trying to make sure that we understand that. And building what the Minister said, we've come up with 4 sections of this plan that we're delivering on. Our number 1 statement, in case there's any doubt on it, is that we are structuring ourselves to defend the UK position. We want to help our companies position themselves as powerfully as possible to be in a stronger position when they're dealing with their UK customers. Also, and it can't go unsaid, we're also looking to defend the Ireland market position, because there is the threat of cheap imports. There is the threat for the next coming number of months, or wherever forecasts you can do on currency, that there is an opportunity for Northern Irish or UK suppliers to look towards the UK market, or to look towards the Irish market and be more financially interesting to customers. Just as importantly, though, we have to look at extending our market reach. And it's all about making sure that balance is right. Within Europe, it's about building our position. There is a strong awareness already of the Irish food offering, but looking at international markets, it's in many cases entering those markets and building a sustainable position within that. The Minister has already mentioned that he has allocated funds to Bord Bia, and over the last number of months, from 2016 and 2017, a total of 3.6 million has been allocated from the department to us for new initiatives. And this is in addition to the funding that we would have traditionally had received from them. And just to give you a flavour of the type of things that we've been looking to do with that funding, Well, it's around understanding better the market, because if we're talking about everything that I've mentioned in defending, building, etc., has been around the markets. So we're looking at market insight and helping us to identify and support with industry and identifying new opportunities. So that whether that's from shopper insight missions, understanding consumer research in Europe for private label opportunities, the Middle East on dairy opportunities, looking at Southeast Asia, China, Africa, every single one of those regions needs further investment for us to understand what's happening within those markets. Just as importantly, we've been looking at that talent piece, and we're developing currently a new initiative on market placement programme where we're looking, I guess, building on the Origin Green Ambassador model of putting contacts or trade our contacts, Board Bia people or Board Bia assets into our customers so that they can understand and build that key account insight that we need to bring us to the next level in this market. We're also looking at our market presence. Where do we have resources? What are new innovative ways of using those resources to make sure that the impact that we have in those markets is more acute than ever? And we're also then looking at our trade missions and trade fairs. This year, Board Bia, with the Irish industry, will be at 27 different trade shows. That's one trade show a fortnight if you're going to do a crude division by it, but it's a huge increase in the number of shows. And not only are the numbers increasing, but the size of our stands from the number of companies that we can bring with us to these shows is also increasing, as are the trade missions that the Minister is leading, that we're designing then to have as much of a business conversion focus as possible going forward. And finally, we're looking at company funding. We already allocated with the market intensification programme immediately after Brexit, 650,000 has been allocated to companies to help them in their initiatives and their marketing efforts while they face the Brexit situation. So what we're now looking at is the process of prioritisation, because you could keep doing new, but then you're just flapping around. And what we now need to do is understand exactly what is the focus of our industry? What is the focus for ourselves? And we've built that on our sectoral analysis, because what we're now looking to do is design and design and design a huge understanding of what's happening by each specific sector. We're then, with today, looking at companies and looking at the Brexit Barometer from that perspective as it builds upon that market assessment focus that we've been talking about earlier, because it's all about how do we react in a new and different way. We're looking at the approach of being driven by data. And I guess when I was giving you context earlier on about how much emotion is going to be in the surround sound with elections going on, with changes going on, with who's right and who's wrong, we actually want to have a source of data all of the time. And that data is going to feed, from a sectoral perspective, what is the structure of each of these industries? What is the output? What is their dependence on the UK? What's their appetite for innovation? What's their capacity for innovation? What are the competitive issues that it faces? What are the solutions to any of those? And to start road mapping that sectoral analysis all the way through so that we can then create robust scenarios on how that industry will be faced with or what are the challenges that it might have to meet. Which brings me on then to the individual part of it, which is really what today is about on our Brexit Barometer. What we're now looking to create is a new analytical tool for the industry. Because there's so much analysis and assessment being done, this is bringing it back home to individual companies. Because one of the key pieces of the pressure points that we're going to face is the risk that we're facing. So much of this is unknown. It's managing likelihoods of occurrence, and it's trying to understand if this happens, how are you fixed for that? So it's about your readiness, the resilience that you're going to have to build into your business and manage as these new things face you. How we've structured it, and this was done in partnership with PwC, is through 100 separate questions in 6 key areas. And those 6 key areas are around understanding the route to market. Who are your customers? How do you supply them? What is your dependence on any specific customer? What's your range of customers? What's your supply chain looking like, and where are the likely blocks in that supply chain that might fix with? What are the trade environments that you're dealing with? What are the people risks that you may have? How many people do you have in the UK? What's the profile of those people? If they leave, if they have visa issues, how robust are you to be able to deal with that? Currency is pretty clear to everybody. And then we're looking at customs and taxes, which is a brand new area for many of our businesses as they look at the UK. And it's trying to build up where is the skill sets that we need to have. We've been working on this over a number of months, and the pilot findings when we did this with 9 companies originally, and this is key, and I think it built on what was being said earlier, is that when we did this pilot with companies, very few companies had actually sat down at this stage and talked about what was Brexit for them. as a company, not as an individual, but sitting down as a senior management team. And that's one of the key pieces that we as an industry need to do, is actually as senior management teams sit down, rather than making this the problem of the finance guy or the innovation guy or the export guy. This is a serious issue that's facing every single one of our businesses at a strategic level. And it has to be dealt with at a senior management level. So when we looked at the feedback behind that, though, it's very, very positive. And a couple of the companies who've been through that are here today, and they can share their insights with you. But one of the key things is it's discussion. No one has the right or wrong answer, but by having discussions around what the key issues, there's a huge benefit coming from that, because that management team are every part of your business, from your supply chain team, from your finance team, from your risk team, or from your marketing innovation team, your key account people. And that might be a smaller team or a larger team, but it's important that they're all talking to each other on it. So PwC helped us to build this programme over 3 months, and we now have a team of 14 sector managers in Bord Bia who are ready to hit the road effectively. And we're now going to be taking a concentrated effort of getting this out to companies. What we need from you is that your senior management team buy into it. So this is not just to have a meeting with one Bord Bia person against one company person. We need from you a commitment that your senior management team will sit down, and we're trained to help you in this particular area, to walk you through this toolkit. We believe that at least 200 companies should do this in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and that's what's going to give all of us the robustness of the data, because it'll be a two-way flow of information. What you'll get from this information is a signal from us on a traffic light system that will tell you these are areas of vulnerability, these are areas that you're actually well prepared, these are watch out areas. And we'll feed that back immediately to you, and you'll get a printout from us that gives you that insight. But it will also walk you through what future proofing you'll have to do for your business as well, and we want to partner with you doing that. So not only will the insight help you deliver what you're doing, but it'll help us deliver the next round of programmes for it as well. So when we're looking in closing then at the next steps, and sorry, one thing I did forget to say, and I'll be killed, on your leaflet or on your seats, each one of you has a piece like this. If you haven't already signed up to undertake the Brexit Barometer, there's a card here that you can sign up to us and drop back, and we'll contact you straight away on it, because we're very, very anxious to have you signed up to deliver that programme with us. But I guess the key piece that I wanted to close with is, so what's next? What's the key part of it? And I guess the tone of the what's next is the key elements that I want to get through to you. We were talking yesterday, and we came across a quote that I thought really captures up what all of us have to do, but most particularly what's running through Bord Bia's mind as well, is that it's a futurologist that I hadn't come across before, but I haven't met that many of them in my time either. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think we're in the biggest relearning experience of our careers. And the key part from Bord Bia and from us as an industry is that obligation to make scholars of our industry when we look at this particular quote. So from our perspective, we're rolling out the Brexit Barometer now. We want that to be open for the next month, and we then want to gather all of that information back from you. That information will be your personalised data, but we're then looking at what are the trends and the issues that are facing the industry. We're following that then by completing our sector analysis, which will be informed clearly by the data you're giving us. We're then reviewing and realigning all of our services once again to ensure that we are best positioned to support you as you face these new challenges, and we'll be launching then any of the new programmes that we need by June of this year. So as you can see, there's a lot going on, but key to this is the support that we'll need both for yourselves and with yourselves to get us through the next journey. Thank you very much for your attention.